Uh, okay, I want to ask you about doping, which is always a thorny issue. You were very outspoken as an athlete. There's that famous moment when you held the sign up about EPO cheats. Uh, I'm just wondering from an outside perspective, like as a running fan who's not close enough to the running world, although probably closer than some people, but still, it still feels impossible to know. There's people go, everyone's doping. There's other people. Well, no, I don't think anyone says nobody's doping, but it's really difficult to know. Particularly, I mean, the last week we had 56-minute half marathon by a guy.
Mhm.
We had the 209 women's marathon. And I just see it on social media everywhere. They must be doping. There's no other explanation. But then, of course, you ran a kind of time that was a huge step change in what had gone before. And I know people have said that about you. She must have been doping, particularly
Mhm.
at that time. How can she run so much faster? So just from an athlete's perspective, and I know it's difficult, but if you were holding out that sign, you must have been quite confident there were people cheating. So how do
Yeah,
you
we
know who's
knew.
cheating? How did you know that they were
We
cheating?
knew at that time
Yeah.
because, and that was why I think it was important that we did that at the time.
Mm.
So basically, Olga Yegorova, the Russian athlete, the French lab had found positive traces of EPO
Right.
in her. No, which was it? They had to do the blood and the urine both at that time. So in
Yeah.
one of the samples, it was definitely there, but they hadn't done the other sample.
Yeah.
So they didn't have the two together, which is what it needed at that time. So they had a positive for EPO. So there was no doubt she was taking EPO.
Right.
But because the two tests that needed to be there for it to be watertight as an anti-doping case were not done, that's why
Right.
it couldn't
So
go
it's
through.
just a
So that
loophole.
felt, yeah, it was a
Yeah.
loophole and it was
Okay.
incredibly unfair. And you're right, as an athlete, you kind of go through that. And I do remember before that point, someone close to me saying to me, and it really hurt me at the time, but saying, well, I don't know whether you're doping or
Mm.
not doping, whether you're clean or not, because the only person I know who definitely is not is myself.
Yeah.
And it's actually true. As a top level athlete, the only
Right.
person you know 100% is yourself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's a huge strength when you know you're not doing anything
Yeah.
and you're beating these people that you're hearing all these rumors about.
Yeah.
You know that it is possible. Um, but I think the thing leading into that 2001 World Championships was the three Russian girls had come onto the scene. They were racing really well, out kicking everybody at the end of races. And of course, there starts to be the talk going round and how are they doing this? How are they able to do this? And you hear all the rumors go around. But then I think when the news came out from that lab,
Right.
then a lot of the runners just felt very, very let down by the anti-doping system because what they're basically
Yeah.
saying is, we know that's happening, that is what they're taking, but we haven't got the testing in place yet to be able to catch that. And that's really hard to hear because
Yeah.
you need it to be working at 100% because you're giving 100%, you're working really, really hard. The last thing you want is to know that people could be taking something and getting away with it because that starts to play in your mind as well. So
Yeah. Of course.
that's really what we were asking was, okay, hey, come on, step up now. You
Yeah.
need to support the athletes better. We're offering to be available for more testing, to do more blood testing and things like that. You have to be able to go with it because that system has to have the trust of the athletes. And that was the biggest thing that it really didn't have then.
So that's to do with that episode. But what do you say to people who just say, "Oh, everyone's doping," or also that when people do an incredible performance, they just automatically attribute it to doping? Is that
I think it's
is
sad.
Yeah, it's
I
sad. Is
think
there
it is.
anything we can do or say to people to reassure them, or there isn't, or like you say, you just don't know?
You have to improve the testing. You have to improve.
Mm.
That is only happening because the faith isn't there in the testing,
Mm.
and because unfortunately there probably are some people out there getting away with it.
Mm.
And the minute that people realise that, then those questions start being asked, and it's really unfair because as an athlete being accused of something, all you can do is comply with the anti-doping test and trust that they will be able to prove that you're
Mm.
clean. If they can't do that, not
Yeah,
only are they not catching people that are cheating, they're not helping you to prove that you're clean either. So they're kind of letting everybody down.
yeah,
Um, but having said that, I mean, this isn't like throwing out a huge big criticism at anti-doping. They're doing their best.
yeah,
It needs a huge, huge investment of money and technology and manpower into that, plus also from the moral side from the athletes as well. It has to be a strength because I really fundamentally do believe that the clean athletes out there are the ones that are toughest mentally and strongest because they know that they've done it the right way. And that is a strength on that start line. And
Mm,
when it comes down to really, really hurting, if you've taken a shortcut, you won't hurt as much through that part.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember when Kelvin Kiptum broke the world record in the marathon. I remember, I think it was Let's Run said, we we don't know of any drugs that can make you run that fast. Do you think that, I mean, how much difference can they make? I mean, how, like you say there, you're kind of saying that if you're taking drugs, you may also be at a slight mentally disadvantage. Is it, can they just make you run a world record by, I mean, well, there's this whole issue now of the enhanced games. I don't know if you know about the enhanced games, and
Yeah.
it's it's got a lot of funding. It's got very few athletes at the moment, but they
Mm.
seem to be shooting for this idea that, yeah, all it takes is drugs and we'll be breaking all the world records. What's your take on that?
I mean, that I really wouldn't want to go anywhere near and go near it with a barge. But I mean, the biggest reason is you also don't know what kind of reckless games you're playing with your health. And yes,
Yeah.
okay, we might be all not exactly doing the most supportive things to our body when we're pushing hard in training. Yeah, we understand that, but you're not actually taking something that you know can harm it. And I think that is a mental, it's one of the things that can play on people's minds, I guess, if they
Mm.
have taken that shortcut, as well as I'm sure the continuous worry about the shame of if you're caught and also whether I'm going to get away with it each time. It must be a
Mhm.
huge, huge
Mm.
mental strain to live with. And in terms of that's the biggest thing at the moment, I guess, is there are so many different parameters thrown in there at the moment. There's the shoes, there's the bicarb and other things that are coming in. There's the other improvements that people haven't really talked about. The fact that they've improved the gel fueling in marathons so much that that's making a huge, huge difference to the times.
Yeah.
And all of those things are cumulative. So how much of that where do you set the limits and how do you know
Mm.
who is and isn't? And I just think you have to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Mm.
And yeah, you're right. I mean, I went out and moved the record forward a whole chunk. People accuse all sorts of things, but you know that you're doing it the right way.
Yeah.
And so if I can do it, I'm not superhuman or different to anybody else. So other people can move it forward with the shoes, with the fueling, with lots of other things, and that can still keep moving forward and keep improving. So I guess, I mean, the only way that you can look at it is not with that outright cynicism. You can't just reject things. Having said that, there are some times where you see a performance and it just people just don't trust it. And I can understand that because if there's no outside evidence of fatigue and normal things that would come into play in the marathon at the end, then of course there are going to be questions asked too. And that's where I'm saying the only thing that we can do to get over that is to
Mm.
develop the testing and to kind of get out there. And you can't know how much it's worth because you never have, or you never would ever, I don't think, have a clean world record holder or top athlete who will say, okay, yeah, let me take the drugs and let's see what I can do with those as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we don't want, they wouldn't do that, and
Yeah.
you don't want to ask them to do that. So it's really hard to know the exact difference that it makes, and we've got to catch up some way with the science.
Yeah. You think they're getting better with the testing than potentially in the era you were running, or not necessarily?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think without a doubt they're getting better, but the doping is probably getting better as well at the same time, and the different things available out there. So it's always going to be a cat and mouse game. And when
Yeah.
there's a lot more money to be made in the doping side, then that money's not going back into the chasing side either. So it's got to, I think it's got to come to a head at some point. Because otherwise, I guess the biggest danger that we're looking at is the credibility of what we love about the sport is lost.
Yeah.
Because
Well, that
if you
exactly.
get to the point where predominantly people watching don't believe the performances, we're lost.
Exactly. I think if you're thinking like that, why are you even watching? And if
Yeah.
that, and but then if everybody starts thinking like that, then they probably will stop
And
watching.
still, if you look back at last year and you go and ask most real core running fans, what is the best marathon that they watched last year? I'm actually going to throw it out there that very few are going to put Ruth Chepngetij's 2:09
Mm.
ahead of that Olympic Games final, which was
Mm.
a battle down
Oh
to the
yeah,
line.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I do think that always there will be running fans who want to watch a race and want to
Yeah.
watch competition and really kind of get into that competitive
Yeah.
race
Yeah.
and watching what happens there rather than a time trial. So yeah, I do think that the fans will stay there, but we do need to get behind it. And also, it's not just a 9 to 5 job. I mean, athletics isn't a 9 to 5 job, so you can't have the anti-doping being a 9 to 5 job either. They've got
Yeah.
to start working all hours and doing lots of things and putting the exact same investment in that the athletes are doing.
They do that, don't they? They do turn up at 3 in the morning or like
Yeah,
occasionally, do
yeah,
they?
yeah, they
Yeah.
do. But I'm not saying that the scientists there in the labs are doing that
Right.
for that much,
Right.
trying
That's
to
true.
work out the
That's true.
testing. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, I think across the board, that kind of commitment has got to be
Yeah.
at the same level.
You had a period where you were somehow in the firing line. I know it wasn't anything like a failed test, and it was, well, I'd say what you think about it. I think it was a misinterpretation of
Yeah.
blood levels because it was incomplete data. But that must have been a very stressful period in time, particularly for someone who, had been
Mm.
advocating for clean sport. How did
Yeah.
you, how bad was that, and how did you cope with that?
I mean, without a doubt, that's the worst thing ever that I've kind of been through in your life because you can't prove. I
Yeah,
couldn't prove anything because you can't go back and say, well, yeah, it's just a misinterpretation of it. And even the scientists at the integrity unit and at WADA were saying, well, no, it's totally normal. When once you've got the reasons and you've got the explanations and you extrapolate the data correctly, then there's nothing there. But trying to get that across was really, really hard because it was, as you said, just being deliberately misinterpreted for headlines by the Sunday Times, who didn't want to know the real story and blocked me even from talking to the scientists who'd done the original misinterpretation. So, I mean, it's still going on today, and it's still something that really, really annoys me. And how you get past that. I think I let it go because there were far more serious things that I could control and that I
mm,
could do something about going
mm,
on in my life to kind of get me through that. And then the other thing, I did sit down with a sports psychologist that I didn't need to the whole way through my career, but at that point, I actually did
yeah,
to kind of get that strength of, you know what, you look in the mirror, you know you didn't do anything.
mm,
And so that's what actually matters. It's your belief in the people that you trust, the people that you know, and what they think about you that really makes who you are. But still, I'd be lying if it isn't something that I'd love to just be able to just put down a piece of paper, go
yeah,
back and reanalyze things and say, ding, 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 there you go, you see. Um, but it is really hard, particularly as then the blood passport and the ABP was something that I'd spent a lot of time campaigning for. And that's in essence what we were asking for in 2001. And then they're doing all of the data collecting and they were learning with it. And so
yeah,
we were in essence the guinea pigs. And some of the things that flagged mine were because they were taken too soon after the race, which has then been brought in. Athletes mustn't train too close. So if you've done a hard workout and they come for a blood test, you shouldn't do it within that hour. You
yeah,
should sit down first so that the reticulocytes come back down to normal. So all of those things that were just misinterpreted.
yeah,
And just the effects of racing hard as well in terms of how training hard, how that sends that up and dehydration. I think when they looked at one of the other scores was around the World Half Marathon Championships, and again that was just because in my mind, I probably went a little bit the other way, and my husband would laugh at me and just tear his hair at me at the same time because I would really overhydrate before a race,
right,
so just not to get dehydrated within the race.
right.
But then that obviously dilutes your blood as well in the pre-race tests, which is what had happened with one of those. So again, they all looked at it. The scientists, they all didn't make anything of it, as I knew they wouldn't. And then it just got leaked out there and misinterpreted. And because there is nothing that you really can do about it, everyone can discuss it and keep having their own takes on it.
Yeah, it's a bit too nuanced for people to who aren't like willing to put the time in to kind of work out.
Well, it's that, and it's also the fact that, like you said before, when you have run fast, people also do want a reason for that and how to
Yeah,
explain it. And so I think that was a little bit, I mean, I don't think I don't know, it's hard to imagine what was actually going through their
yeah.
heads as the journalists, but
Well,
maybe they
there's that
did.
thing, isn't it? The bigger they raise you up, or the bigger you get
Yeah.
raised up, the bigger they want to knock you
I mean,
down.
are they just doing that? I don't know. I mean, I know there were other athletes at the time that were very, very similar to me, and they actually turned around and said to them, "We're not interested in you. We're only just going after one person, and you don't need
Yeah,
to worry about it because we know you didn't do anything," which is totally unfair when those values are very same as mine.
yeah.